When I was reading this report, I had to take a moment. My brain went into freeze mode. So I was like, okay, PowerShell 1.0, how the hell is this even possible? And uh, courtesy of our friends and Talos sent in a response, they went, no, this is not what you think it is.
That is not a fun Monday morning. Now, if completely rebuilding Active Directory sounds extreme, buckle up. Welcome to the Talos Threat Perspective, where we break down the threats that are making life harder for defenders. My name's Hazel Burton, and today it is Talos Incident Response Quarterly Trends time again. So, my colleagues Joe Marshall and Craig Jackson are going to be joining me to talk about the key attacker trends from Q2 2025. This quarter, phishing remained the top method of initial access, appearing in about a third of all incidents. Now, that's slightly down from last quarter, but what is concerning about the attacks that we've been seeing recently is the vast majority of them are from compromised email accounts, making them look even more convincing. We're going to get into all of that in a bit. Meanwhile, ransomware and pre ransomware incidents made up half of all Talos incident response engagements. That's pretty on par with what we've been seeing so far this year. But one group did stand out this quarter: Qilin. It was our first time observing them, and they came in hot with custom encryptors, new exfiltration methods, RMM tools to spread far and wide, even taking down an organization's entire Active Directory in one case. Now, there is one entry in this report which made us all stop and blink. We saw that ransomware actors leveraged PowerShell 1.0 in a third of all ransomware attacks. When Joe heard about this, this was his reaction.
It felt like that scene in Die Hard where John McClane throws the dead terrorist out of the window and then shoots the machine gun into the hood of the car, and like the guy's backing up screaming, and he goes, "Welcome to the party, pal."
Yippee-ki-yay, Infosec. We're going to get into it all, so let's now explore the key tactics, tools, and procedures that defined Q2. We're going to start with phishing. Now, most of the attacks that we saw didn't come from random spoofed addresses, they came from real compromised accounts. What's interesting is that in most of the cases, the goal wasn't to steal money or data directly, it was actually to steal more credentials and then sell them on. For attackers, that is often simpler and less risky and more reliably profitable.
I don't know, Hazel, if you remember, like a year ago, I was trying so hard to coin the phrase cascading BEC, cascading business email compromise, because that's what we were observing. We saw the adversary would set up a mock domain to target a specific organization. Like it was, you could tell there was intent to hit one specific target. But then what we would see is once they were at that target, they'd say, hey, you know what? We're here. Let's capitalize on this access and let's continue to develop what we can in terms of this unauthorized access down the chain of trusted connections.
The thing you have to realize is that attackers are spending only fractions of a penny to do these phishing attacks. They are super duper cheap, and if it's dumb and it works, it is not dumb.
It's like a phishing Matryoshka doll. You open one compromised account, there's another one inside, and then another one, another one, another one. We're going to move on now and talk about ransomware. Now, it made up half of all Talos IR engagements. That's not a huge change from the previous quarter, but this was our first time responding to a Qilin ransomware attack, and let's just say they made an impression.
They've been extremely aggressive this past quarter. For being relatively a new brand, if on the name market of ransomware cartels, I've been following their disclosure site, and they have been, I think, especially vicious for victims who have not paid.
There's a lot of reports saying that operators and affiliates from Ransom Hub migrated elsewhere, namely Qilin as well as Dragon Force, in addition to several others. So that could be one explanation for the rapid increase.
Yeah, in one incident, the compromise was so deep that the only safe move for the organization was to completely rebuild their entire Active Directory. Not patch it, not clean it out, burn it down, and start over.
It's not uncommon to rebuild Active Directory when if it gets smoked, especially if you don't pay and you're not going to get a decryptor. Or let's say I do pay the ransom and the ransomware affiliate or cartel gives me my decryptor. Those decryptors usually are not great. Like they're single threaded, they're not very efficient. It takes forever to decrypt anything. And the victim, I think rightly, is going to look at this and go, you know what? Let's just blast this all away, reimage and start from scratch because I can't trust what's been done or not done to the system or what persistence or backdoors have been created.
That is not a fun Monday morning. Now, if completely rebuilding Active Directory sounds extreme, buckle up, because in a third of ransomware engagements, attackers use PowerShell 1.0, the original version from 2006. Now, this is quite the story that Joe's going to tell, so go into your cupboard and grab your popcorn. I didn't have any in my cupboard, so grab the closest thing. Ooh, lovely.
Oh, my sweet summer child. So when I was reading this report, I had to take a moment. My brain went into freeze mode. So I come from the sysadmin world. I have my MCSE. Like I have been steeped deep in the wizardry that is Microsoft Active Directory. And PowerShell was revolutionary because we didn't have to use .NET wizardry to do like Active Directory queries. So I was like, okay, PowerShell 1.0. How the hell is this even possible? And uh, courtesy of our friends and Talos sent in a response. They went, no, this is not what you think it is. And so I had to do some digging. And this is where my brain locked up, and I went, that's not possible. You can't run a 1.0 PowerShell binary on a 7.4. And the answer is the way this attack works is, and this is extremely savage, is it's basically BYOB, bring your own binary. All right. So you take a legacy 1.0 PowerShell binary and you drop it into like a Windows directory. Typically a protected directory of some kind that's either not being scanned or has to have a permissive nature to it because you've got applications that have to run and whatnot. All right. And I'm only running this binary. And when I execute this binary, I'm going to use .NET commands for reconnaissance. And the reason you would do this is, so let's say in a normal 7.4 PowerShell infrastructure, I would bring in these commandlets to do it, like AD user, AD, DC domain controller. Like if I wanted to look for domain controllers, if I wanted to look for users, those generate logs. And you can actually go to the PowerShell log of any domain controller or local machine, and it'll actually show an event code and this commandlet was generated. And I went, yeah, this is a much stealthier way of doing this. But the part that my brain just locked up was how incredibly so the PowerShell 1.0, no logging whatsoever, or very little logging, to be honest with you. It still uses .NET. So if you know raw.NET, or which is not that hard, to be honest with you, it's a near English. It's like SQL, in my opinion. You can figure it out. There's no logging happening there. Windows will absolutely execute it, right? Because everything is based on .NET, even PowerShell, really. And adversaries are going to use this BYOB, this side-loaded binary, for lack of a better phrase, to do really great reconnaissance. No one's going to detect it. No one's going to be looking for it. And it's going to kick the living shit out of any defender that's going to go, how the hell do I even begin to look for this? Because it's not going to generate a log. And I was just, my brain melted. And it's not a complete system downgrade attack. It's just loading a binary that Windows will let you run because you can't, otherwise you just can't execute, like, you can't downgrade your entire AD infrastructure to PowerShell 1.0. It's not going to happen, but you don't have to. And I was just like, wow, this is savage. Like, this is really, really smart. So there might be some mitigations that I would think, like, A, don't let, anything that says the words PowerShell on it not execute unless it's signed by system root. That's a really, really good one. Like, it needs to be signed by Microsoft. That's not a guarantee. The stuff can be stolen or fabricated or messed with. Like, it's not a bulletproof solution, but you're at least putting some hurdles in front of the adversary. for them bringing their own downgraded, binary to sideload and then to do their reconnaissance with as well. Um, Increase your logging in the directories that have to be more permissive inside of Windows. Like, just be very diligent about what's running in that directory.
I did not think this through. This looks really, really dodgy. Oh well. As Joe says, the burden is often on defenders to ask questions like, what would happen if this happened in our environment? Now, that is a very good question to ask now before it's too late, and I know how ridiculous I look and sound when I say that. Let's now talk about MFA. And no, I'm not going to talk about the fact that a lack of it resulted in many incidents, although it did. I want to talk about the fact that there is one particular thing that threat actors seem to love about certain MFA deployments this quarter, and that was the ones that have been installed with self-service options.
So if I was an administrator of my organization's multi-factor authentication security suite, I would wake up every night in a cold sweat wondering if someone has self-enrolled a device that's going to let them launch an attack on my enterprise. Because once you're in, you are in. There will be nothing to save you at this point in time other than other security controls. So the idea, the premises behind this, and this is not a new process by any stretch. How you get there will be different based on the vendor, the MFA solution that you're going after, how it's configured, so on and so on and so on. So the best case scenario for them is to enroll an attacker controlled like a mobile device in a MFA soft token, so like a software based token that would be on your phone or your PC or whatever. And therefore, I don't have to bug you over Teams to click a green check mark every single time I need to break into your network and do maliciousness. So that is that is the attack path and ultimate goal.
As Joe was saying, if I was in identity management, I'd be waking up in a cold sweat because I'd be thinking, who's enrolling devices without authorization on my network. Don't wait to find out. You know, get your threat hunting game in order and start threat hunting in your identity management environment. Start looking at whatever you're using for your MFA platform. Run these weekly checks, even just grab reports from it and say, hey, these 10 devices were enrolled this week. Do we know or recognize all of these devices? Are there any IP addresses or any indicators that are suspicious about these enrollments? And proactively look for this stuff happening so you can be on top of it if and when it does happen.
Let's wrap up with a final tactic that stood out this quarter, and that is in a few ransomware engagements, we saw threat actors use remote desktop protocol not just to move laterally, but to quietly exfiltrate data. In one case, we saw them target a backup server, and what they got away with, I'm going to let Craig explain it.
We assess with moderate confidence that the threat actor accessed the backup server and pulled the ntds.dit database off of the backup server. So that database should only exist on domain controllers, which tells me, again, moderate confidence here based on the data that we had for the investigation, that the adversary got it off of a backup of the domain controller from the backup server, which raises an interesting point because we very often, when we talk about security of backups, especially with ransomware engagements, we often hear, we have immutable backups. Our backups are protected. The threat actor, even, if they somehow manage to get access to certain systems, the backups are immutable. They cannot change them. But what I think we sometimes overlook as defenders is, yeah, they might be immutable, but they can still be read. And if there's sensitive information in those backups, like an Active Directory database, the adversary might not have to get on the domain controller to pull that information.
Yeah, and ntds.dit is the global catalog in Active Directory. That's every container, every user, every computer object, everything that is the database of Active Directory. And if you've got that, you've got everything. You've got everything.
There's a lot that happens really quickly during incident response, and people are working long shifts for days on end. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of needs for updates, communications internally and externally, and you're not always operating at peak capacity for anyone that's responding to a ransomware engagement. So that's the type of thing that I think could slip through the cracks or be overlooked. But it really needs to be brought to the attention of the responding organization. If you have a customer or your customer is your organization, you need to be thinking about like, okay, what data is in the backups that could be scraped and exfiltrated.
This is unfortunately another reminder that every layer of defense needs scrutiny, even the ones that we think are perfectly fine and perfectly secure. In fact, a lot of the incidents that we cover in the Talos quarterly trends are reminders that attackers don't need new tactics, they just need opportunities. A huge thank you to Joe and Craig for sharing their insights. If you found this video valuable, please do like it and share it. And you can also find the link to the full Talos report in the description. Thanks for watching. Take care.